In the past few weeks, you may have heard the term allyship for the first time. It's become increasingly relevant as the realities of anti Black racism come to the fore and momentum for change crystallizes. So, what is it? And how does one do it? Let's find out. We're going to ask. In Waterloo, Ontario, Kathy Hogarth. She's Associate Professor in the School of Social Work at the University of Waterloo. And in Kitchener, Ontario, Bryan Ferguson, Lead Pastor at Koinonia Christian Fellowship. And it's great to have both of you on our program tonight. Kathy, I think since this is going to be a new word for a lot of our listeners and viewers, maybe we could just start with a definition. How are you defining allyship?
In its simplest form, I would say allyship is where privilege meets oppression in a journey of change.
Nice way to put it.
It's really looking at privilege positions in life, whether that be white privilege, economic privilege, education privilege, and looking at who's disadvantaged, who's living at the margins, the edges of that privilege, and how do we meet to create change for those who are living in the margins.
Is there a right way and a wrong way to be an ally?
There are many wrong ways to be an ally.
Well, let's get an example.
So ally is not taking over. An ally means to walk beside, to walk along with, to amplify voice that is unheard or otherwise muted. It is to do the messiness of life. What I often find, Steve, is that many people who strive for allyship, they fall out of the race the moment it gets messy. Right? And so we hear things like, well, I tried speaking up for these folks and they've hurt me, so I'm out. I say in the allyship journey, and it is a journey, I say the desire for change has to be greater than the fear of the mess, because allyship is messy, injustice is messy. And when we're talking about allyship, it's about injustice and rectifying wrongs, right? And so if we think of centuries of injustice and the messiness of that injustice, then allyship will necessarily be messy. But our desire for change must be greater than our fear of getting messy. And so when we think about allyship, then it's almost an illusion to hold an expectation that allyship is this smooth, great process. It's not. It's just as messy. It's just as bloody as working with those who are living in the injustice that we're working towards.
Understood. Let me get Bryan into this conversation here. Bryan, there are a lot of people who are trying to be good allies right now, but maybe doing more virtue signaling than being genuine allies. Can you help us understand what the difference between those two would be?
Yeah, Steve, thanks for connecting with me tonight too. I'm glad to be here with you and Kathy. And see that sometimes in the midst of the need to form allies, to come together as allies, we can do it with the wrong motive. We can do it with our own interests in mind rather than stepping into how can we mutually benefit from this. And I think a danger in the midst of this conversation is doing it for the wrong reason, a self-centered reason or a selfish agenda, or doing it out of a token reason that you're just doing it to be noticed or to join in some kind of bandwagon experience. So all of those lead to a wrong forming together of being allies.
Well, at the risk of stating the obvious, what's the reason to do it?
I think we can be better together. We could be stronger together. If you think about allyship, as Kathy said, it involves change, and change comes about when we can communicate together, when we can trust each other, when we can be accountable to each other. And all of those things are like strong pillars for a valuable relationship.
Kathy, can I ask you the last 2.5 weeks or so since Mr. Floyd's killing, they've been extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. I don't think we've seen anything like it for, since the 1960s. So, 50 plus years. What has struck you the most about what you've seen on television screens and experienced yourself from across North America since all of this started taking place?
This morning I had to say to myself in the wake of another killing of a Black man in Atlanta.
Yep.
One of the things that I said to myself, it feels like hunting season. And that's unfortunate as we continue to witness murder after murder of Black lives. What strikes me in the midst of it, though, and gives me a bit of hope is, so I participated in a protest march, and I've witnessed many protest march across the country and across the world, really. And what I'm seeing now is there are a lot of folks who don't have skin in the game who are engaging in these protests, who are equally calling for justice. That is a positive sign of change to come. We know that change, and last night I had to reflect on where is this? What's the history of all of this? We know that in the abolition of slavery, we had violent slave riots in countries where there were slaves. But that was not sufficient to create the kind of change towards the abolition of slavery. What also occurred was the economic impact, that slavery became less profitable for the pocketbooks of slave owners. But also we had white folk, some in lots in power and some from religious institutions, calling out for change. So when we talk about allyship, and for me, one of the positive things about all of these protests that we are seeing is a joining together of those who live the experience of injustice and those who see the impact of injustice, but who may live in bodies different from those that are experiencing injustice. When they come together, we create such a unified force. And that's the positive in what we are seeing today.
Bryan, same question to you.
Yeah. As I look, Steve, at what I was hearing on video, TV, recording the protests, at first I just thought, oh, is all this violence needed? It doesn't seem beneficial. And then I stopped and began to sit and listen. And what I heard was my own silence, my own lack of reaction and engagement, and thought, I can't sit here any longer. It actually happened in our own living room. Our youngest son is joined our family through adoption, and he was born in Haiti, so he's Black. And we were asking questions of him as he was feeling as he watched all this unfolding. And he said, I know that Black lives matter, but when are we going to see action? And as I listened to my own son, who I know he knows I love him, I believe in him, I value him, but he's going to step into the same world tomorrow. And if I don't do anything, then to bring change, then he's going to be exposed similarly. And I just thought, I can't remain silent. I need to step forward and become allies with others and stand in solidarity together.
Let me follow up, though, Bryan, with this. And that is, there's a view out there that says this is a moment for the Black communities of North America. And whites, frankly, should just shut up and pay attention and listen. Above all, listen. So give us the argument as to why white people should actually be taking part in this as opposed to being spectators to it.
Yeah, and I think that's the word, Steve. Exactly, that is listen. A book I read that was so valuable brought insight of listen, learn, and then love. And it starts with listening. So if I stay silent and regress back in my house under quarantine, then how will other people groups know that I care and that I want to be a part? So I step forward not with a voice to press dominance or say I'll fix this for you, but to come and to take a posture of sit and listen, and then I'll stand alongside.
Yeah, Professor, that's the thing. I mean, in my conversations with people, white people want to be part of the solution, but many are nervous. They want to be allies, but they're not sure how to handle this moment in history. Any advice?
And I think we have to all see ourselves as part of the solution. We cannot have a solution only with Black people creating a solution. Racism isn't a Black people's problem. Racism is a world problem. It's
That's right.
injustice against certain bodies, but it is not a Black problem, right? In order for racism to exist, we need both Blacks, the body that racism is being enacted against. And that's also, we have anti-Asian racism, anti-Indigenous racism. And so we need those bodies to be there. But then we also need the perpetrators of racism, right? And that's often from a dominant group. In this case, the dominant group is white. We cannot change our society, we cannot change our future without both groups coming together.
So what do you say, Kathy?
All hands on deck.
All hands on deck, I hear you. But what do you say to the white person who says, look, I'm not racist. I'm a completely colorblind person. I don't practice discrimination in my daily life. I really don't see a role for myself to play here. What's the response to that?
I say that's racist. And here's why I say that's racist. First, to be colorblind isn't progressive. It is, in fact, racist. Because I'm Black. It is my color. It is who I am. So when you tell me you don't see my color, you're just erasing a huge piece of my identity.
Yeah.
Right? And that in itself becomes racist. When you remain silent, one of the battle cries, if you were, of all of this protest has been silence is violence. Because when you remain silent in the face of injustice, you, by your silence, give permission for that injustice to take place and to continue. And so silence then, as a white person, isn't a comfort position. It is a violent position. So what do we need from white humanity? And I say humanity because what we are calling for is a connection to the humanity in each of us. Yeah. What we need is, yes, we need you to listen, but we also need you to use your privilege of whiteness. And I go back to this word of privilege. It's so misunderstood because when a number of white people hear this word privilege used, it's used as a way of shaming them. It's used as a way to say, you've got all this unearned, you earned this on our backs. You didn't earn whiteness on my back. You didn't earn whiteness. You were born into it. And it allows you not to see certain realities. And that's true with every other privilege. It is true with economic privilege. It is true with educational privilege. It allows us not to see the reality of those who are facing injustice, the opposite of the kind of privilege we own. What allyship means is being aware of my own location of privilege, and then constantly reflecting and learning about how do I use the privilege I have to make a better world for those who do not have the privilege that I have.
I was really going to try hard not to bring any politics into this discussion, but okay, here we go here. And I don't know who wants to take this on. Bryan, maybe both of you. Bryan, why don't you start on this one? You know, some political scientists could argue that Donald Trump got elected because there were a lot of poor white lower class people in places like Kentucky who'd lost their job at the mill and the life that they knew had completely exploded, and they weren't feeling particularly privileged in their white skin. Discuss.
Yeah, and I think you're revealing, Steve, something that there's not equality in our world. There are white people with privilege, and there are white people impoverished. And that's a factor of our world. That's an effect that all of the world is experiencing. So no matter what country we're born in, where we're at, there was a time when there was dominance. But I think some of the trickling of that effect is still evident. And that's what we hear Professor Kathy speaking about, is that the white dominance can still come in. And those of us, therefore, who still have some privilege and positioning need to speak up and not remain silent. And it needs to be for all people groups. So there will be my white brother who is struggling economically, and I need to step in and help him or sister. And the same with a Black or an Asian, a Latino, Indigenous right here in Canada. So it crosses all people groups, and it's not just a black and white issue now. We need to step into it together and find ways to discover unities and be stronger.
Kathy, can I get you to weigh in on that? How poor whites in the Appalachians don't feel particularly privileged?
Yes. So I think, Steve, you're absolutely right in terms of Donald Trump getting in this gap, this vacuum that was created because you had poor white folk who felt absolutely left out. We need to make it very clear that white privilege is not the same as economic privilege. And so you can be a white person and still be poor.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when you hear white privilege, you think, oh, I have all the privilege in the world. And that's the rub for a number of white people, because they don't see themselves as privileged. They haven't lived economic privilege. They haven't lived educational privilege. And so how dare you talk about my privilege? So making the clear distinction between white privilege, economic privilege, they are two very different things. You can have white poor people, and we've seen it. And I think Donald Trump has really rode that wave of poverty, of a mass following of white and other intersections of whiteness. And I think that brought him in. And I think that's the same wave he continues to ride, because he speaks a language, unfortunately, as we do politics right now, it is this language of us and them. It is a divide and conquer.
I want to, with time running out on us here, just play a video. These are some celebrities and they are white celebrities, who are into a campaign called I Take Responsibility. Tony, you want to roll that clip, please?
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility for every unchecked moment.
For every time it was easier to ignore than to call it out for what it was.
Every not so funny joke. Every unfair stereotype.
Every blatant injustice, no matter how big or small.
Every time I remained silent.
Every time I explained away police brutality.
Bryan, what do you think of these efforts?
Yeah, I think it's a good start. It's acknowledging that we've made some mistakes. Because anyone, whether it's famous people, their position of popularity, power, influence, it's time to speak up. And well, it's past time, but our generation now needs to step into it. So I think it's a good start. But like my son said, may it not stop there with just our words. May we take action and then start to act on that responsibility and walk it out in life.
Kathy, your take on it?
Yeah, I think we can't see change in our world without first acknowledging our own complicity in our current reality and acknowledging that we have a part to play. But like Bryan said, words become meaningless if they are not followed through with action. So saying we take responsibility, it's great. It's a great acknowledgement. Understanding what we are taking responsibility for, and then moving to ask ourselves, so now that I've taken responsibility for this, what am I going to do differently? How does it not stop here?
Let me, at the risk of, because we're down to our last couple of minutes here, and at the risk of burying the lead and maybe making you two a little bit uncomfortable, which I never mind doing, frankly, to guests. Okay, Bryan, how do you two know each other?
Yeah. Kathy and I know each other. We attend the same church, but I'll give you even more background. My wife was a student in her program and learned under her academic. And I was so excited when that was going to happen because I thought, I want to learn from this professor. And so as much as my wife was a student, I felt like I was. So I started to press in. And now Kathy and her husband, Keeble, and I are doing life together and learning from each other.
Kathy, do you consider Bryan an ally?
I consider Bryan an ally, and one of the good things about it, and I like making people uncomfortable because I say we can't change in our comfort. We won't change when we're comfortable. So I'm also that agitator for Bryan who would say, but look at this. Can we think about this differently? Can we challenge these behaviors? And so for me, my position, and Bryan and I have only recently started to do life more intentionally because I think change is about intention, right? It is about when we talk about our leadership, and Bryan happens to hold a leadership role in our community. So when we talk about leadership and change, it is how are we intentional? How are we challenging with intention and doing relationship with intention? So yeah, I think he's an ally. He's got skin in the game.
He's got skin in the game. We're really delighted you two allies could join us on TVO tonight. Kathy Hogarth, Bryan Ferguson, Godspeed to you both, and hopefully we'll see you again down the road sometime.
Thank you, Steve. Yes. Thanks, Bryan.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.